Welcome back. Indeed, we did tell you that a former member of the House of Representatives, Right Honorable Mark Bila, is now asking for freedom of information request with 11 federal institutions, and he's asking for statutory justification and official documentation regarding a presidential directive that altered the Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission statutory cost of collection. Now, there are big questions as to what exactly this is about, and we're going to be exploring a lot of things. Why this is important at this time, because this Freedom of Information request was made this year, but it's about a memo that was released from the Office of the President's Chief of Staff. Yeah, it does seem like, you know, it's relentless, more or less. July 7, 2023, from the Office of the Chief of Staff, directing permanent secretaries of the Ministries of Finance and Petroleum Resources to restructure the NUPRC statutory 4% cost of collection. Well, Honorable Mark Bila is right here in our studios. He's a former member of the House of Reps. Thank you so much for joining us, Honorable. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Malpa, and thank you, Kayla. Good morning.
Good morning. We're a little curious as to why exactly your FOI request has come at this time.
Okay, so let me start by saying that we're at a crossroads in our country where we have, it seems to be, budgets that are running concurrently and are not being implemented. We have been told severally that there's a huge windfall because of the removal of subsidy, but we're not seeing that translating into tangible results. Contractors are still being owed, projects are not being implemented. So the question is, where is the money going? And the NUPRC is the premier regulator of our mainstay in our economy. Unfortunately for Nigeria, we still have oil and gas as the mainstay of our economy, and they're the main regulator. So whatever affects the NUPRC affects our revenue, affects you and I, affects international recognition and respect for our systems and our operations, and hinders even the foreign direct investment that we're looking for. So that's the importance of it. And why now is because this is when the information came to the fore. And this is why it's important, we're trying to point out, because I am part of a coalition soon to be registered. We're trying to register it, but right now we're working through our lawyers, Kronos Legal. We're trying to let Nigerians see a very veritable tool that we have not been utilizing in this country, which is the Freedom of Information Act. In the 9th Assembly, I'm sure, Mark, but some of you called us a lame duck. I don't know what you're calling the 10th Assembly now, you know, but we have seen that there has not been that ability of the legislature to hold the executive to account, which is their fundamental responsibility. But Nigerians need to know that they also have the powers. It's interesting to note that in Section 3 of the Freedom of Information Act, even those that are physically challenged, there's a provision for them to make a freedom of information request. Those that are illiterate can actually go to an agency. They can go to the Office of the Chief of Staff and say, okay, I know if you speak English, but I want to know so and so. And the officer is supposed to write it down and then give the person requesting that information that document in writing and then respond to it. So this is the foundation of what it is we're intending to do. And like you rightly pointed out, I will still give you a background to this issue. You know, I don't know if I can go ahead and do that.
By all means.
Okay, so the main fundamental thing now is a memo was written from the Chief of Staff to Mr. President saying that the NUPRC is collecting a huge amount of cost of collection, and it is not being justified why the members of staff are earning such huge allowances. You'll be surprised that that is part of what is in the memo. And so that the justification for them is so that money is so much for them that it needs to now be split. 2.5% for the NUPRC to now utilize, and then 1.5% that was supposed to be ring-fenced. for a particular metering project, and the directive was given to the permanent secretaries and to the Accountant General of the Federation. So the question is, what is the cost of collection? Now, the cost of collection, unfortunately, is not statutorily provided for in the PIA to the NUPRC. Is the authority that has a specific percentage, but the 4% was inherited from the DPR and FAC allocations. So that is a lacuna that some of us sought to take care of when we were enacting the PIA, but you know, this whole tendency of carried, you know, affected it. So that's a fundamental lacuna. But that, from the statutes that I have seen, remember, a freedom of information request is not accusing anybody. It is requesting for clarification about that. But from the statutes that we have seen, the freedom of information requires that they provide for us details of what statute was used for the directive from the president. The fact that the percentage is not indicated does not mean the president can give that directive, because it is clear in the provisions of sections 12D, 22 and 24 of the Act that all funds that accrue to the Commission are subject to appropriation by the National Assembly. That is why one of the requests we have sent is to the clerk of the National Assembly. He needs to let us know, was there any appropriation officially submitted to divert so and so funds for this usage? And secondly, the Act indicates clearly what that amount is supposed to be used for. Can the president by fiat alter the usage of the amount? No, he cannot. We need to start to recognize that we're a country of laws. And if we do not start to do things properly, then of course the recognition will continue to be a pariah nation to the rest of the world. There's another very critical part of it that I'll still get to. At the moment, it is alleged by Pengerson, because Pengerson has been internally engaging the NUPRC, and we're privy to that information, that 1% of that 1.5% now is being sent to the midstream and downstream petroleum regulatory authority. That is another very strange part. So there's 0.5% that we don't even know the whereabouts of it.
Okay. Well, I do also know, and this is through sources, that I know that there is some internal dispute between the NUPRC and NMDPRA as a result of jurisdiction. I mean, we know that there used to be one big body before, DPR, but now they've been split. And then we also know that in terms of who does what, how do we define what is midstream and downstream, what is just strictly NUPRC duties? Those lines in some places appear blurred, and there are allegations that, oh, you are encroaching on what we are supposed to be doing. So whilst that is being handled, you are now saying that you have written 11 federal institutions, and clearly, I mean, this is a good thing, because I do remember that when this FOI request, when this FOI bill was being pushed in the National Assembly, it was made to seem like it was something for journalists only. It was something that only journalists were going to benefit from. But clearly, we're seeing that even former lawmakers are now exercising this particular law to try and get information. What exactly has the reaction been? I mean, have you been able to get clarity on what exactly is the matter in this instance?
Okay, so it will still be important for me to highlight a few points, but let me respond to that quickly. None of the agencies has responded except the CBN.
Okay.
Now, the CBN responded technically, and as far as I'm concerned, because I'm looking at the provisions of the Act, it's an excuse. They responded to say that we asked for the CTC of the document, but that the CTC is a requirement under the Evidence Act and not under the Freedom of Information Act. Now, that is strange to me, because the Act clearly indicates it in the FOI Section 7 that if you are giving a reason for not responding, you should show what part of the Act allows you to take that position. But they are referring us to the Evidence Act, not that part of the Act. So ordinarily, they should know that the FOI makes it clear that regardless of any existing statute, they're supposed to provide that information. So we intend to, our lawyers will respond to the CBN accordingly, pointing out what we consider to be the statutory position regarding this request. The others have not responded, so probably when I leave the studio today or tomorrow, we're going to issue a 72-hour ultimatum for them to respond. And if they still don't respond, then we're taking them to court.
It's interesting that you have asked for a certified true copy,
yes,
not just information. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, so we asked for two things. We asked for information because in the FOI Act, if you don't have that information, you can get back to the person and say, okay, we don't have this information. We have asked for information, then we have asked for documents. And the CTC is required for official documentation. It's sort of like what is considered to be typical in our country. A CTC only verifies that this is official and this is a true representation of the documents you are requesting. So that is what the CT is requiring. Now, let me point out here, and I need to make this very clear, that part of what we intend to do, like I said, we're trying to adopt this veritable tool to hold our government accountable, because we realize that even after office, and Mr. President, his chief of staff, and those who are working with him need to know this is not a partisan position. This is about citizens holding their government to account. And when they leave office, we will pursue this issue against the president.
It's very interesting because
we'll pursue it against the chief of staff.
That's exactly why some people will say, okay, maybe that's why the CBN has drawn the line. Because you're not just asking for information, you're asking to weaponize the information. The request for a CTC, a certified true copy, is something that will be admissible in a court of law.
Definitely.
And it's very interesting that even though you're a former lawmaker and can very well write a letter, you have chosen to apply for this through lawyers. I do not know if this is a very good example to citizens in terms of how to actually utilize, how they can utilize the Freedom of Information Act. Is there any reason, are there layers underneath why you've requested for this particular information?
Okay, so let me clarify something you just mentioned. There is no statutory requirement for making the request. You can make the request as an individual, you can make the request as an organization, you can make the request through your lawyers. We chose to make it through our lawyers because we chose to have good legal advice and counsel regarding what is exempt and what is not exempt, regarding the processes that we need to take. That's important to make. And so that's why it's important for Nigerians to understand that this is not doing anything negative. This is how it's supposed to be. And then the request for the CTC, obviously, it is something that should be admissible in court, because when we get the information, we would look at the statutory basis upon which it's done. If it's unlawful, if it is not backed by any statutes, then we will explore what remedial measures are to hold the government account. This is our duty as Nigerians. This is what we consider it to be. It's not weaponizing, it's not witch hunting, it's holding people account to know that even when you're in office, you need to be guided by laws, and know that if you do not do that, you are going to leave the office. Section 305 and several authorities, FAWEMI versus the federal government of Nigeria, Mohammed Abacha, and all of that, there are statutes, there are authorities that show that when you leave office, your actions while in office, even the president, is not immune to prosecution. So we would have all these records, we will keep them, so that at the time he leaves office, if there was any infraction, we would take him up on it. If there was any infraction by anybody who gave the directives to, who were just obeying without checking. And that's why it's important that we want to point out here, and I'll read some figures to you so you understand the magnitude of what we're saying. Because I watched somebody called Don Azza, you know, Don Anza or Don Azza or something. He was trying to counter a report by People's Gazette. I hear People's Gazette brought out a story about this. And apparently the Don Anza or Don Gaza or whatever he is not a science student or a student of mathematics. So on a lighter note, those of us who got an A in maths maybe need to educate him, because he didn't seem to understand the figures that were mentioned. People's Gazette, why I'm not holding forth for them, were correct in the amount they indicated as the value of that 1.5%.
That's 54 billion.
That's 54 billion. But the interesting thing Nigerians need to know is that in 2024, that amount was 104 billion. This is the amount we're saying they said was allocated for a contract. How do you allocate a contract that is perpetual? The cost of collection is a recurring amount, amounting to 104 billion in 2024 and 54 billion after 2023. And you say you are ring-fencing it only to this contract. And that contract they are referring to, and that's another error that Don Anza made, is not the statutory duty of the NUPRC to execute. In the 7th schedule, 7L Part 3, it clearly indicates that this is the responsibility of the licensees and lessees to do. It's not the responsibility of NUPRC to deploy that metering. So that's why we're asking, okay, so let's show us what is the basis for your doing that. Because the Act clearly says, and like you know, I was a former part of the leadership of the upstream committee in the House. I'm quite informed by the provisions we made in the PIA. There's no allowance for the NUPRC to be deploying what they are allocating 104 billion to deploy.
Oh, just a moment. By licensees, you mean the operators?
The operators, yes.
Yes. We'll come to that.
Clearly provided.
We're totally out of time. But just so you can we understand? Let's say we're talking to just regular Nigerians.
Yes.
Because this People's Gazette investigative report that they've done, you know, it's causing ripples everywhere. Everyone is talking about this. So let's understand in simple terms. What are you accusing Mr. Gbajabiamila of doing? And how does that impact Nigerian people?
Okay, first of all, I'm not accusing my former speaker of anything.
Okay.
I am saying that the actions taken from what I've seen in the laws, in the extant laws, were not in line with the statutes. And we want to receive information to clarify how that was done. If you say the NUPRC was collecting too much money, did you get advice from the relevant body, which is the Incomes and Wages Commission, to say, okay, because we made it a provision in the Act to know that because of the industry they're in, they couldn't be paid normal wages.
Yes.
They needed to be provided with allowance. So these are all allowances made in the Act. Okay. And these are things you can invite Pengerson to clarify for you, because Pengerson has listed several issues they are having now because of this non-availability of these funds. Bayo Onanuga, again, responded erroneously, saying Mr. President has the power to instruct. That is not correct, I dare say. And I challenge Bayo Onanuga and the Chief of Staff to an open debate.
So the justification...
And I'll provide the statutes. They should show me the statutes that give the President that power.
The justification for his request, he cited the parts of the PIA.
24, yes, 24
so 24 to C.
Yes, if you read that provision, there's no such power indicated there. That just talks about the allocation of the cost of collection. Then it down talks about the usage of that cost of collection. It says nothing about Mr. President making that kind of decision or giving that kind of directive. And that's why I'm saying that these are things that if the government is transparent about this, they should instruct Mr. President, should please instruct these institutions to give us these records. It's my statutory right as a citizen to request for them. Give me these records, let me see them, otherwise I'll go to court and request for them.
Yeah.
Of course, Nigerians will say, okay, is this not our normal court system? We say, yes, but let us test the system. I want to see the judge that will see the statutes and want to rule against it. We will take it up with them in the NGAC and any other international courts. We're ready, we're taking this fight the long haul. We want to let Nigerians see that these are avenues we have. I'm not in the House at the moment. I'm not in the National Assembly, but I realize, and I start and I realize, but I have powers as a Nigerian.
I always try to find out, how did they get this memo? Because this whole story started from a memo from Aso Rock.
No, I think it's a memo from, the memo was sent to the ministry. So I believe that is where...
That's where it came out from.
That is where it came out from. That's obviously where the news outlet obtained...
That's where People's Gazette got it from.
I'm just a little curious, though. What is the reaction of the members of the National Assembly been? Because if you say that the president acted ultra-virus through his memo, has the National Assembly, which you were a part of, maybe he invited you, or at least to say, indeed, maybe we were sleeping on our jobs, we're sleeping on our rights. This is something that we ought to have done, and maybe the president cannot do this. Has there been any reaction?
Well, let me give them the benefit of doubt. They might actually not know that this has happened. And if the committee in charge has any knowledge of this, then it is obviously because we're in a National Assembly where the chairman of National Assembly sings on live international television, "On your mandate we shall stand," which is disturbing. So obviously that means that kind of institution cannot hold the executive to account for what might be unlawful. And that is why this is not where we're stopping. There's another Executive Order 9 we hear that was issued by Mr. President redirecting the Frontier Exploration Funds, which again was enshrined in the PIA, that it should now be removed and be paid. You know, I think, Mr. President, sir, you need to have right advisors. And that's why it's good to employ the opposition maybe to help him, because it seems those who are in his party or who are his appointees can't tell him the truth. I wonder what the Attorney General is doing, because you cannot, in a country of laws, just issue instructions by military fiat. We're not a military junta, maybe from our antecedents of military rule. You know, so clearly we're not accusing anybody, we're asking for this fundamental information. And like Don Anza said, there were some rather, let me call it, excessive statements made by People Gazette. Again, like I said, I'm not holding account for them, but if Don Anza too, I want to challenge him to a public debate to let him know that his mathematical calculations were wrong. Okay.
Well, I mean, certainly that he is now also an important source of information, particularly for, you know, those who are trying to understand the nitty-gritty.
Yes.
And certainly clarification that will be important. But what are you hoping to achieve? Where would you say your job is done and, you know, you have received clarity which you are seeking through the FOI request?
Okay, so one of the key things we need to know is that particular contract, and this is where we will start to know whether there were interest in it. Who are the people who executed that contract? Has it been executed? Where are these metering systems? Where are they located? Let us see them, where they are pumping 104 billion annually to deploy something that is not your responsibility, as indicated in the Act. Who are those companies? We can go to CAC and ask, who are the owners of these companies? How was the payment made? Was there any procurement? Well, that's why we wrote to the BPP. Was there a certificate of no objection? We wrote to the budget office. Was it part of a budget? You don't just expend Nigerian funds at your whim and caprice. There are statutes, there are rules. So what we will say we have achieved, first and foremost, is when we have been given the information. That's all we're asking. You can see that I'm not accusing anybody. I am clearly saying that I have just indicated what I believe is not the power of the president to do. What in law is called is ultra-virus.
So what you need, certified true copies, not just the information provided like this.
Yeah, we want certified true copies.
You want certified true copies.
So, but if they still want to just give us the information
as is,
as it is,
will you
that's
accept
fine.
it? You'll accept it?
We'll still accept it, although we'll prefer certified true copies, something like you said, that can be tendered before a court of competent jurisdiction.
Okay. We'll see how that eventually pans out. We have to thank you for your activism and showing Nigerians, reminding us of
very quickly, and there are issues in terms of security, which we want to delve into, although that is a sensitive area. It's one of the things that I believe is exempt, but we intend to navigate around it because we don't know all the resources being pumped.
Okay.
How are they being utilized?
I think that will be another conversation, Honorable. We have to thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. Honorable Mark Bila is a former member of the House of Representatives. He used to represent Gwe East and Gwe West. I hope you've been spared. Your community has been spared the latest onslaught in Benue State.
No, we have not, unfortunately.
Oh dear. Well, as you did say, security is another conversation. Thank you very much once more for speaking with us.
Thank you very much.
We'll take a break. When we come back, Laulu Akonde will be with us in the studio. Please stay with us.